Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Bryant Coleman, and I serve as the Project Financing Manager with the Regional Economic Development Initiatives team here at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Thank you for joining us for the very first session of the California Jobs First Project Financing webinar series. This monthly series is designed to support the implementation of projects and initiatives identified in the California Jobs First regional plans. Each month, we'll be spotlighting different financing tools and strategies with the goal of providing you with practical insights and approaches to help move your projects forward. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Your audio and video is disabled, but we will have time for a Q&A at the end of today's presentation. Since your audio is muted, we ask that you place your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And our team will be monitoring the chat and will direct questions to our speaker as we wrap up. And then also, today's session is being recorded. Both the recording and the presentation slides will be shared with all registrants after the event. And the recording will also be posted to the GO-Biz YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. We have joining us John Keisler, CEO and Managing Partner of Sunstone Cities. Sunstone Cities is a leading economic development consulting firm dedicated to helping local governments drive business formation, economic growth, and job creation. And John will be sharing with us today how public-private partnerships can be leveraged to implement high-impact regional economic development projects. So John, I'll go ahead and give the floor to you.
Thank you so much for not only including us in doing these sessions, but also for this topic. After 20 years in local government, and especially in economic development, this is not just a professional passion of mine, but I love California, born and raised here. So proud of what California represents and what it does, to lead the world economy. And a big part of that is our government's role. And so I'm actually, after 20 years in local government, I am now the CEO of Sunstone, our family of companies, and we do economic development through public-private partnership. And so I'll talk a little bit about that today and hope that this is the beginning of a conversation that we'll continue to have, not just with economic developers, but also across the state of California, our elected leaders, our education leaders, and of course, our leaders in the private sector. So giving a little bit of background just quickly, I hope everybody can see these slides, but I'm going to walk through a little bit about our structure and our philosophy that comes out of 20 years in economic development and both the public and private sector. So Sunstone Cities, which is one of the companies in our family of companies, is actually on the left-hand side there, really focuses on a couple things, helping to enrich communities through investment and economic development. But this is a group of professionals from the public sector who have lived inside city halls, inside state government, who have had that experience firsthand of turning public policy into programs and services. And so we help government agencies to introduce workforce, business, or real estate development solutions. And that could be a range of things that we'll talk about. On the right-hand side then is a different company within the Sunstone family of companies that really focuses on the private capital. And what we mean by that is that we raise private credit and private equity. It could be venture capital for early stage technology startups. We have about 90 of those early stage companies, but also it could be loans, private credit loans. And we have a lot of investors who want to put their money to work in really meaningful economic development projects. And I'll show you some in clean energy. It could be in public infrastructure, things that really drive benefit for the community. So I want you to just visualize that to really engage in public-private partnership, you also need to have different capabilities. One, to raise and manage private capital under the SEC rules, and then on the other hand, how to put together the structure around procurement and the financial analysis, but also how to get things built in the public sector. So when you look at really what private capital does, I talked about private credit, debt, private equity, venture capital. On the right-hand side, that's a huge part of our economy. No doubt about it. That is a huge part of the global bond market is about $140 trillion. And a lot of that money, over 50 trillion, comes into the United States of America to build stuff, right? On the other hand, there's private credit. It could be just loans between individuals or endowments, family offices to build specific projects, and that's a huge part of how like hotels and hospitality and a lot of that private development happens in our cities and in our state to drive property tax growth, sales tax growth, TOT, bed tax growth, all of those things that we rely on in terms of revenues to provide services. Then on the other side, government, this is really still in America and especially in California, a critical driver of economic innovation, emerging markets. It could be in energy, transportation, defense, aerospace. California leads the world in these things. And one of the reasons is because our government puts a tremendous amount of policy, ambitious, innovative policy goals for our economy. The regulatory environment helps to incentivize certain kinds of industries and adoption of certain kinds of business and technology solutions. And then finally, the tax incentives and the rebates. It's no surprise that one of the world's biggest entrepreneurs, we all know who he is, came to California from South Africa and built his first companies around the incentives for solar, the California incentives for solar panels and then electric vehicles. And then, of course, those big contracts with NASA and DoD and all of those incentives that he needed to build his companies came from the government. And so when we think about this partnership, you need to have public policy, regulation, and government as customer to anchor these big economic transitions that we see in the world. And we need private capital to come in. But there's a need for solution providers to bring public and private capital together. And that's what we do here at Sunstone Cities, is that we provide that bridge between public and private sector, between public resources and public policy and private capital to build things. The investment that's needed for developing companies, so business development. It could be for technology solutions. So that's why California leads the world in venture capital. Did you know that over 50% of the world's venture capital comes into the United States of America? And over 50% of that comes into California. And it's because of these investments our universities. A lot of the innovation is anchored around our universities in the Bay Area, both public and private, Cal, Stanford. I'm a USC Trojan. We do a lot of good stuff down in Southern California too, around different industries, around aerospace in particular. We lead the world in that. And then in San Diego, you see a lot around biotech and pharmaceuticals. They're anchored by government contracts, university research and development, and in the private sector, people like me now, investors like me now, we look for the big government priorities. What are those huge policy priorities? Where are the big budget line items for research and development going? Because that's going to de-risk the investments that we're going to make. There's another thing that we look for on the private side when it comes to investment. We want to see where the public capital is going. So, USDA is a good example of providing low-cost loans, providing, loan participation, loan guarantees for investment in our rural areas. And it's not just agriculture, it's rural energy, it's infrastructure for water systems and a lot of commercial loans. EB5 is a way of bringing international capital in to the United States of America. Brilliant program that has been around for about 30 plus years now. CPACE, commercial, loans for financing energy efficiency, for upgrading our facilities and even building some new infrastructure, and tax increment financing for what a lot of our local governments know, former redevelopment agency people, providing the ability to lend or borrow against the incremental growth of sales tax, property tax, other things that might be in special districts that we can form to stimulate private capital investment. And then finally, the government grants. No surprises about that. We also look to non-dilutive capital, like not loans, not equity, but non-dilutive capital like grants from the government to do things like vaccines. No surprises. The government did grants and loan guarantees to expedite the development of vaccines during COVID, and it worked. The private sector, once we saw that public backstop, that public guarantee, we saw those loans and grants going into the research and development. We knew that we would be ready to help commercialize those technologies, those vaccines, that infrastructure once the government had de-risked it. So it's a really important relationship, and government needs to move first. They're the most creative, innovative, long-term thinkers about where the economy needs to go, and they need to de-risk it for the private sector before we can all jump in. The other side of it, though, is that government cannot do it alone, and it can't sustain it. Government capital, as a partner, needs to be very thoughtful about when and how long it incentivizes a marketplace before the market becomes more mature, it stabilizes, and then maybe even it scales to the point where government incentives are no longer needed. So private capital, what is government trying to induce? We talked a little bit about private equity. We talked a little bit about, early stage venture capital. California is still by far the leader in this. And the secret sauce for us was originally defense contracts back, in the 40s and 50s, around the Bay Area, software that was needed for radar technologies. Lockheed Martin needed a lot of solutions. And so partnering with places like Stanford University was a perfect example. But that then spun out into all these other clusters where private equity wants to cluster around research and development and some of the best and brightest in things like aerospace, defense technologies, now AI, but all kinds of things that are big problems, big challenges that require the best and brightest solutions. Private credit, which is debt, but coming from a lot of very creative and sometimes more flexible kinds of tools. It could be a blend of private equity and private credit, which is a mezzanine kind of hybrid sort of capital that can help grow companies. So it gives them a little bit of equity and a little bit of growth capital, but it's built, we build this in very unique ways to help these early stage technology companies grow. And government really can't and shouldn't do this. This is where they need private capital to come in. Surety bonds, using insurance products. We have partners that will actually bundle contracts for construction, for revenue, future revenue. And then in those insurance policies can then provide the certainty to bond buyers or even private capital providers. It de-risks that loan or that investment a little bit. And so the capital becomes more affordable to the borrower or the business owner, the real estate builder. So surety insurance products are critical. And then credit enhancements. The idea you can do this on the government side. We're going to talk about GO-Biz and how the iBank is one of the most innovative and creative public financing solutions in America. It's an incredible resource going back to the early 90s to fill gaps in the market with credit enhancements, loan guarantees and things that over 50 billion in private capital has been induced to build projects because of these solutions through our California Infrastructure Bank. And of course, we talked a little bit about P3 financing, where I'm going to show you some creative stuff we've done, some case studies where you use public-private partnerships to actually build public infrastructure. So state of California, the best, absolutely the best. I'm wearing my California Vans today, just for inspiration. We've got the most creative companies, some of the biggest companies in the world by market cap are here. Don't believe all the hype that you hear. We are still leading the nation by far in job creation, growth, business creation, obviously $4 trillion in GDP. No other state is coming close to that at this point. And as a nation, we only have 40 million people, but we're right up there with countries like Japan, who have 100 million people and really advanced, mature economies. State of California is incredible, and we're all blessed to be here. We got our challenges. We always will have our challenges, but we can solve them because we believe in investment. We have a very entrepreneurial mindset, and we have a very community-focused mindset. We believe in solving problems, investing in solutions, and the iBank is one of the most creative public financial solutions in the country. And if you haven't really dug in, I'm highlighting one program here that, Climate Loan Guarantee Program. That's hit some challenges with the federal government changing and lawsuits and stuff, but that is one just creative example. The ISRF program, which many of our cities have used and hopefully we'll be using for World Cup and Olympics to build big multi-billion-dollar transportation infrastructure, clean energy infrastructure for our venues and moving people around during the Olympics. But GGRF, cap and trade, and other programs like this put a tremendous amount, and we're hoping that some of this money will also help us to backstop the incentives that are being pulled out of the federal budget. California, we've heard good things that the governor, GO-Biz, Dee Dee Myers and their team, but also the iBank board and commissioners are stepping into this void and saying, hey, you know what? We're gonna continue this growth in moving our economy forward with these kinds of incentives. So I'm gonna transition for a moment because a lot of people will ask me like, hey, these are great ideas, but these are like moonshot, pie in the sky kinds of thinking. You just love California a lot, and what has actually been built? What have you been involved in? So I want to tell you about just a couple that I've been involved in, and then a couple that I think are good opportunities for us moving forward. One of my favorites, and I was just last night in Long Beach with Congressman Garcia. He was being sworn in by Vice President Harris. She came to Long Beach to swear him in last night. And we were talking a little bit about Space Beach because Congressman Garcia, at the time when I was the Economic Development Director, he was the mayor. And we were facing this massive problem of this 90-acre, 1.8 million square foot facility, which had been in the city under Boeing for the C-17 Globemaster manufacturing. It was ending. The contract with the federal government, the DoD, was ending. And we were going to lose decades and decades of engineers and manufacturing and economic prosperity. What were we going to do about this? And so in about 2015, they started to wind this down. And in 2016, I got tapped by the mayor and the council and my city manager to really help to lead the transition on what are we going to do with these big properties that would otherwise tank a city or a local economy. And so what we focused on was how we could partner with Boeing, how we could partner with the federal and state government to transition this heavy industrial aerospace manufacturing facility into something that would lead the future of the economy, advanced manufacturing, satellite launch, commercialization of space. People thought we were crazy, but you know what? There were crazy people in California. There were a guy named Kaina Perea, Traylon Bradley. These were GO-Biz, Governor's Office of Business Development staff, who we put our heads together and we said, what can we offer in terms of transition to attract the best space companies in the entire world? And I'm going to tell you, it absolutely worked because we were partnering. The property owner, Boeing, private company, the federal government, the DoD, economic adjustment grants to map our supply chain, to implement a supply chain workforce strategy, a government grant, Office of Economic Adjustment. We did the specific plan, what's now called the Globemaster specific plan. And we not only created value for this property by doing a rezoning and creating a vision around this new economic cluster we were going to call Space Beach. But Congressman Garcia, he wasn't the mayor at the time. I'm going to give him credit because he was 100% behind this. He's a dreamer, big picture guy, but he came up with the name Space Beach. I wanted to call it something else. I wanted to call it Launch Beach. He wanted to call it Space Beach. He called me one day and said, I'm the mayor. I get to pick the name. And the rest is history. 6 years later, after working with GO-Biz on ETP, employee training program grants coming out of the EDD program for workforce. California Competes grants applications. We attracted Rocket Lab, one of the greatest current launch companies in the entire world. They relocated their world headquarters to Long Beach, to Space Beach. And now they have their command center. We have 4 command centers now, 6 years later, who are currently monitoring their aircraft in space. We now have Relativity Space, which has some of the world's biggest advanced manufacturing additive printers. They're printing the engines. They're printing the rockets, and hundreds of jobs. The Vast, who's now building, they're going to be building the apartments in space. They're going to be building the retail spaces for all the people who are going to be working up there. It's absolutely phenomenal what's happened here, but it was the government leading with the vision, partnering with the private property owners and the private investors. And we were able to, through public-private partnerships, to not only help with creating value. The land, which originally had been appraised at about 150 million, went for about $225 million. We added value to the private investment. We added value by expediting the building and permitting and licensing requirements, by rezoning and then changing those local codes. We also worked with GO-Biz to provide those state sales tax incentives on the Cal Competes grants or the ETP money, so that these companies could use money to train new employees and attract new employees. And then we introduced them to our universities. These companies all got to meet with the deans of our College of Engineering over at Cal State Long Beach, which is an incredible engineering program. 1,200 engineers graduate a year out of that public university, but others in the region as well. So I use this as a perfect example of P3, economic development strategy. And today they say somewhere between 12 to 14 billion in private equity market cap now has been invested, or valuation has been created through private owned companies. So really, really incredible example of what GO-Biz can do in partnership. Another P3, this is one that got built over the past decade in Long Beach. This was the Long Beach Civic Center. I got to sit, I was the first person to sit in the economic development director's seat in the new city hall. But we had a massive problem. We had to replace a 40, 50-year-old city hall building, and it was going to cost $225 million. We didn't have that money, and we were not going to charge our residents, through issuing a bond or doing something like that, raising taxes. So we had to come up with a really, really creative mechanism to replace this facility. And thankfully, we had a very, very creative city manager, an assistant city manager, Pat West, Tom Modica, and a really incredible partner, Jeff Fullerton and Plenary Edgemore. You can watch videos about these interviews now about how they built this project. $600 million project in the end, in terms of private development on the private sector balance sheet. The city does not have any debt on this. We have a contingent liability to step in. We have an availability payment that we pay annually, no new taxes. But through this really, really amazing P3 partnership with Clark Construction, Plenary Edgemore, Johnson Controls, etc., this 40-year deal is one of the most innovative and creative and biggest municipal P3s in the nation. And I can tell you, I've sat in the chairs. I've used the technology. It's a clean, more efficient set of buildings. That's the port headquarters on the right, this new city hall on the left, the Bob Foster Civic Chambers, where we just saw Kamala Harris yesterday and Robert Garcia get sworn in, but also our new library and all that other infrastructure through this really creative P3. Really amazing example of what you can do without issuing municipal bonds and taxing your community. But that takes public-private partnership. Another good example is this one, where our sister company, American Lending Center, I think they've put about $100 million of EB5 and USDA money has come in through our partners in this private development, clean energy, geothermal project out in Utah. And this energy, some of the power purchasing agreements for this energy, clean energy, renewable energy, is going to come into Southern California. And so this is something I'm passionate about, because this was a rural energy project. We're bringing economic development in. We're bringing foreign direct investment from around the world into these kinds of infrastructure projects, and they're going to have a huge impact on the diversification of our energy sources in California, the resiliency of our energy in California, and also to help in the long run. If we can continue to build clean and renewable, low cost options, we can lower the cost of energy for our businesses, for that manufacturing. Remember those 3D printers in Long Beach that are building rockets? Ton of power that's required ongoing to print those huge vehicles. So this is one I'm excited about. Another really good P3, a Samaritan public hospital, but getting private capital and us helping to bring different forms of both government and private to complete their capital stack and have a huge impact on a community that needs healthcare. These are projects that may not just get funded by the private sector. They want to see government there to underwrite the risk, like I talked about earlier. They want to see that there's alignment of public policy, there's alignment of incentives. But this is how we're going to help to build in emerging markets. And also, this is how we're going to help to really open up new opportunities in rural communities as well. So what are the opportunities ahead of us? I want to make sure we get to some questions. They're huge. The Olympics, they're coming to California, right? They're coming to Southern California, but this is a whole state thing, our third time to host. I know I live in Long Beach. There's going to be venues, about 9 or 10 venues right near my house. So I want to help with the state of California, the Infrastructure Bank, GO-Biz, obviously the IOC and LA 28, but also, with our regional transportation agencies. We've been in discussions with them already about how we can expand the number of EV vehicles. Well, if you do that, you also need fueling stations. You need to expand fast chargers throughout the region. You need hydrogen for the heavier vehicles and long haul vehicles. The venues need to be retrofit. There's about $1 billion of projects just in Long Beach, but I think there's about 40 billion that has been identified throughout the region. We're going to need private capital to come in, but we're also going to need public capital, incentives, regulatory alignment, streamlined permitting and licensing. We need them to partner to underwrite some of that risk and to make sure that this stuff gets built in time. So these can be revenue producing venues. The new arena retrofit in Long Beach, which will help for these venues. We can make money, commercialize that. We don't have to charge our taxpayers to build this stuff. We can partner with the private capital and private sector to not only reduce the amount of municipal finance and bonding, but also to get this stuff built faster and right size it for profitability over the long term. The clean energy microgrids and power plants. I talked about the vehicles, but also, these big venues that we're talking about in Long Beach. I want to be very clear, that some of them are old. There's 1 million square feet on the Queen Mary of hospitality and entertainment space that'll be looking back across to the Olympic Village and all those sports venues with sailing and triathlon and all that stuff. These will be on camera. How do we put in the capital to upgrade some of those facilities? The Big Dome, that's a customs facility, right? That's a partnership with the federal government and Customs and Border Protection. And, we have close to 1 million boardings per year through Carnival Cruise Lines. These are all big transportation hubs that will be venues and event spaces for entertainment. So how can we reduce create lower costs for the energy? Well, biomass, there's obviously solar and stuff like that, but there's a lot of new technologies that can create energy on site and stabilize not only the energy demand, but also the price and upgrade, use some of those savings to upgrade these facilities so that they're more energy efficient. And if you can plug in and electrify, you also can reduce emissions. You don't have to run, those diesel generators or those other things. And I'm not even talking about the big Port of Long Beach right behind on this picture, but they're doing incredible stuff. I just saw Mario Cordero last night at the swearing in, and he was really a leader in the green port. And so the electrification of these facilities, whether they're entertainment, hospitality, or goods movement, really do have a positive impact when it comes to reducing emissions and improving health, and also lowering cost for these major industries. I wanted to give you an example, though, like the small stuff. We're working with these companies. This is a woman-owned company in Southern California that is also engaged in P3s, where they're actually building the charging infrastructure for cities and municipal agencies at a small scale. And we're bringing private capital into companies like this, structuring both the enterprise. You remember I talked about hybrid or even mezzanine kinds of capital. We need to work with government contracts, the public, who need this infrastructure to get private design, build, operators, and we need private and public financing. So really creative stuff with the California Energy Commission, with the state of California, but we need P3s around this. Another one that I thought was just one to kind of finish on I talked about real estate P3s, but this is another business development P3 that came through our Long Beach Accelerator and out of Cal State Long Beach, our public university. Electric now has received private equity investment from companies like Sunstone Advisors. They've received technical assistance from P3 accelerators like the Long Beach Accelerator. And now, they're converting medium duty vehicles that do goods movement and do delivery in our regions. And these trucks are converted in less than 2 weeks to full battery electric. They help the drivers, many of them, single vehicle operators that can't afford new electric vehicles, but they lower the operations and maintenance costs for these drivers. They extend the life of these vehicles because these chassis can last a long time if they just get engine replacement. And the beauty of it is that I talked about the state incentives that GO-Biz and the Infrastructure Bank, as well as the California Energy Commission and CARB, the incentives like HVIP and other grants that can come in and help pay for half and even 75% of the retrofit of these vehicles. And these are really tiny operators and really tiny, startup companies that are in California. So I'll sum it up with saying public-private partnerships can be big, like Space Beach. They can be big infrastructure projects like the Long Beach Civic Center, but they can be tiny business development strategies like the Long Beach Accelerator and Electric and Green Wealth and these little companies that will probably grow and create jobs and have an impact and someday be big companies. But we can use P3s in many, many creative ways across workforce development, business development, and real estate development to power the economy. So I'm going to stop there and ask the team to look at some of the questions that you might have that have come through either in the chat or maybe I'll pass it off and happy to continue the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, for that extremely insightful and informative presentation on P3s. I think you've given this audience a lot to think about in terms of how these models can be applied to advanced regional economic development work. And I really appreciate you highlighting how P3s can be utilized in different types of economic development activities, from workforce development to business development and real estate, and can apply towards a wide range of projects, irregardless of scale. I think very often we assume P3s are most useful for large scale economic development projects and public infrastructure. So we appreciate you highlighting some of the other types of projects. So yeah, at this point, we like to open up the floor for questions. As a reminder, if you do have a question for John, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And John, I think you have access to it, but I can also go ahead and read them out loud if you like.
Yeah, I'm looking at the first one. So I love this question. So anonymous attendee, I hope I meet you someday. Your question is, how could it translate? How could you use a public-private partnership in sectors like arts and culture, trails or outdoor recreation, or in rural parts of the state? So absolutely, these are actually the best places for them. So let me just start with arts and culture. I yesterday was just talking to Griselda Suarez in Long Beach. She's the head of Long Beach Arts Council. And one of the really cool things that we've done in arts and culture and through the Arts Council as well is there's something going on right now called a design district formation in the downtown. And this is a combination of all the different art galleries, the architectural firms, some of the creative agencies, but also the university, Cal State Long Beach, so the education partner. So you have all these private design and arts related businesses and nonprofits, which I consider private. You have the universities, so that not only have their College of Arts and Design, which are heavy participants in these kinds of initiatives, but you also then have government. You have the city who has the ability and has been evaluating for some time how we can create special districts, business improvement districts. That's how you can create ongoing funding sources. So what the city did too with Measure B a couple of years ago was say we wanted to put money into the arts, so we're gonna reserve. We did a little tax initiative to reserve 1% for the arts, and that gets distributed through the Arts Council to many different arts organizations that help to activate corridors around culture, around live entertainment, around public arts, and so that can be on a smaller scale, but it can be sculpture and public arts as well as performance and other things that really help to. We call it like there's the bones, the skin and bones, and then there's the heart and soul. Same thing when I was in the Parks and Rec department in Long Beach. They have a 3-time Gold Award winner nationally for big city departments. We did a lot of public-private licensing agreements and permits in our parks with baseball leagues. So the baseball leagues would get exclusive access to certain fields in exchange for a minimum investment of say $25,000 or $50,000 in the fencing, in the concession stands, and then they would activate those parks facilities, and they would use some of the revenues that they would collect from participants to pay for that stuff. So a lot of P3s in the Long Beach Parks Department that you should check out. Of course, our Percent for the Arts and our Arts Council. And in the rural parts of the state, even more important. I showed you right now, EB5, huge foreign direct investment. Congress a couple of years ago, 22, rewrote that Integrity Act for that bill. That money is only supposed to go into rural communities. So take a look at EB5 as a program for rural communities and USDA. They now have money for all kinds of different kind of commercial enterprise, rural energy and stuff like that, and economic development. So the second one, I think, are there programs or entities currently working across both the accelerator and government funding arenas collaboratively? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So Sean, thanks for this. If there's going to be a video up soon from Tara Lynn Gray. Tara Lynn Gray is a visionary leader in the state of California. She's called the State Small Business Advocate, appointed by the governor. She is hands-on technical expert coming out of the Central Valley on how to help build accelerators and small business support programs across public, private, and education partnerships. And so definitely go to GO-Biz. I would like to, hand it over if you guys want to talk about the iHub program maybe. But do you want to add to that any from the GO-Biz side?
I do apologize, Sean. Can you go ahead and repeat that?
Yeah, so it said, I got a note that says GO-Biz Red would like to answer this question live. So I can talk a little bit more about it, but go to Sunstone Cities is just posting the video about having Tara Lynn Gray here at our offices in Irvine talk about the innovation hubs. There's 13 now across the state.
Yeah.
They're university, government, and private capital partnerships for accelerators and technical support for startups.
Yeah, and those have been extremely valuable in attracting private activity to support technological innovation in all 13 regions. And so we're hoping to really expand that program and and that's actually the iHub program is a prime example of how public-private partnerships can be utilized to accelerate innovation and entrepreneurship in regions across the state. I don't know what the current status of the program is and when the next application is going to be, but that information is typically available on Cal OSBA website, and we're always conducting outreach to make that information available to our partners.
Awesome. Yeah, and one other thing I'll say about the iHub program, which is cool, is that look at the California Jobs First plan.
Yeah.
because there's economic cluster industry priorities in different regions of the state, and every part of California, we have a very diversified economy, has a different strength. Whether it's goods movement in Long Beach and LA, or it's more focused on agriculture or technology and in the Central Valley. Everybody's got strengths that really help to make our economy strong. Those iHubs really do leverage the programs at our community colleges, our state universities that have research and development as well as workforce development capabilities. So look at your region, look at your California Jobs First plan, look at what projects are proposed, and those would be good candidates for iHubs in my mind as well. I think this question is a good one. How do you find private investors? So that's one of the reasons, when I showed you those slides at the beginning, that I found I needed to have a team in our Sunstone companies that were just focused on engaging with government to help figure out what projects need to be built and then figuring out how to finance them. On the private side, you'd be surprised, but there's a lot of capital out there that is looking for projects. And so we also have a whole network of investors. Some of them are institutional, which means they're companies, like they could be a venture capital company, or they could be a family office, they could be an endowment, or even a pension fund. Big pension funds, the biggest in the world, are here in California, like CalPERS. So the private investors, there's usually funds out there that are looking for projects, whether they're infrastructure or they're a type of, we call them asset class. Sometimes they want equity, sometimes they want debt, sometimes they want big, sometimes they want small, sometimes they want a certain mission, like clean energy. So there's broker dealers that know those networks, and they'll take projects or funds to the marketplace where they know where those networks of investors are. Or you'd contact Sunstone, and we have that team that can help think through that and help your city or your community, your county to think through who's doing business in that area at the private side. So it's out there. There's money out there, and there's private investors looking for very niche and specific kinds of investments. This next one, Bethany, how do you balance the need for ongoing revenue generation for long-term sustainability with broad access to community members who may not be able to afford entry fees or use fees related to visiting these spaces? Is that something that is boosted by the public partners in their role? Yes, I think Bethany, you hit it on the head. So one of the things that when you look at your city or your county, your general fund, usually general funds should be used, and the debt that they access is for things that don't necessarily generate income directly. You would use your bonding capacity to build sidewalks and community centers and parks, things for public benefit that don't necessarily you need to charge for, or that need to be open and accessible to everyone. When you're thinking about P3s, oftentimes you're thinking about also things where you can build projects that will either lower the cost to operate those facilities and create savings. That becomes an availability payment to repay the private development, or create new revenue. Those would be like more commercial enterprises. And those are your things like your convention centers, or it could even be a port infrastructure that can charge commercial tariffs or fees to use it. So what you'd like to do is you want to unpack the project. Each project is different, and each project may need a different kind of structure as well as a different form of capital. Bethany says you already are answering this question. Never mind. Is there a limit to the number of P3s a city can have while still remaining open to private partners interested? I don't think that there's a limit to it. And I think actually the need for cities now, more than ever, is to find what we call private capital alternatives and alternative forms of financing both their infrastructure as well as their programs and services. So I have a lot of history as a director of animal control, where we needed to build new shelters and facilities, and so we needed to partner up with nonprofits to provide different kinds of services as well as share in the cost. of development of the physical facilities that we needed. I spent time at Parks and Rec as the business ops manager, where we needed to build out new facilities for our marinas, and we needed to get loans from the state, the Department of Boating and Waterways, to help finance the redevelopment of those piers, but also repay it through private boat slip users on a monthly basis, and rework everything from the services we provided them, energy and internet and all those things. So I can go on and on, whether it was when I was in the police department, I was the CFO, or when I was in economic development managing the Queen Mary. We did the convention center, the Queen Mary. Of course, I've given examples about the Civic Center, but also our Aquarium of the Pacific is a massive P3 with a nonprofit organization where we used our credit as the city to back about $10 million in bonds so that the nonprofit could get an affordable capital. They also nonprofits don't have good credit usually. A lot of them do, but most of the smaller ones don't. So cities can become credited sponsors for nonprofits to get a lower cost of capital as well as meet the underwriting standards to borrow, because the city is going to step in or backstop them if they need it to temporarily repay those bonds and build new infrastructure and then operate it. And nonprofits and private organizations can operate public facilities, oftentimes in creative ways that are specific to an industry or are more flexible and more efficient. So there's no limit to it. In my opinion, it's going to only grow. How much time do we have left for questions?
We actually have until 12:30, John. But so yeah, if you want to continue on, feel free.
Okay. Well, the next question I think is from Arnold Strong. I think I know Arnold Strong from Long Beach. So not only does he have one of the best names in the world, but he's also a super energetic guy. So the examples from Utah and Washington, were you able to work with state governments and local venture groups? If not, what were the challenges working with a California-based group? So in those cases, we actually were working with the project owner. So whether it was a private, clean energy geothermal company like Fervo, they actually had investors, including names like, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. They had their private equity funds where they were raising private capital through that part of their capital stack. And then what we came in on that one, Arnold, we came in with partners from a group called Excalibur, who's one of the most prolific USDA lenders, because it was rural energy and it was creating economic activity, economic development, jobs, and new investment in a rural community. And Excalibur helped to structure those loans to help with construction and actually to lower the cost of capital for building, because it was backed by USDA and the federal government. The local governments there, of course, were happy that we were bringing capital to these projects and creating construction and jobs and things like that. But also EB5 was used in that project. So our partners here in Southern California, American Lending Center, brought a piece of the early stage senior construction loans to come in at a very low interest rate, because those investors, they have to go through USCIS, so federal oversight. But the Congress wants to attract onshore a lot of that. You hear about the trade imbalance and how Americans are buying stuff from abroad and sending their money abroad to buy stuff. Well, a lot of that money is coming back from those foreign direct investors. And we're bringing that money back onshore through programs like EB5 to build things like in Utah or in Washington. In those two examples, that was reshoring foreign direct investment. And those governments, Arnold, were so happy to see private capital and even government-backed capital coming from places like, California as facilitators, Excalibur, that group, some of their staff were in Arizona, but they were very happy to partner with us because they needed alternative forms of financing to get the right amount at the right cost at the right time in the project. So they were more than happy to work with us. But those project owners were on the ground. They were already being supported by their state and local governments. Anonymous, P3 usually faces challenges and regulatory delays and public resistance. how does Sunstone Cities work through that? Well, one thing I'll say is that I would say that the Long Beach Civic Center was one of the biggest learning experiences for us because not a lot of residents, and small businesses want to hear that you're going to build a $600 million government facility just to house government workers. That's not their priority. They want to see you building their streets and sidewalks, trimming the trees and building out their parks and other infrastructure that helps them raise their quality of life as well as boost their business. So that I would give as an example of one of the most challenging P3s that I've ever seen or been a part of. But here's the way it worked. There was an extensive education process where not only the P3 partner, in this case Plenary Edgemore, and a guy named Jeff Fullerton led these discussions, but the mayor, Bob Foster, and then eventually Robert Garcia and the council hosting events in every district of the city, talking through the different forms, alternatives for financing what was a seismic liability with the existing facilities. And when we started to, we spent the long period of time, and we do this with Sunstone Cities. We spent most of our engagements. We spend the first 30 to 60 days on what we would call community survey, where we're starting to meet with opinion leaders, neighborhood leaders, business leaders, real estate owners, business owners, business and technical assistance providers, and we first learn about their pain points and explore the options with them so that they can, like the Socratic method, they can decide for themselves what the best path forward is. So you always have to meet a community where it is, and you have to spend some time educating about the different forms of financing and where that money comes from and who's going to be responsible for repayment. In the end, Pat West, you should watch the video. We posted at Sunstone Cities where I interviewed Jeff Fullerton and Pat West earlier this year. And Pat talks as a city manager stuck between a rock and a hard place. The employees thinking the building's going to fall down, the community not wanting to pay for it. We had just gone through the Great Recession in 2009 and 10. And so nobody wanted to take this on. So watch that video, but that is the key, is helping people to understand what their options are, and also to really spend time education in the education process. But you got to build those champions. You then have to move together with the community, and then there's a lot of obviously risk sharing with the private sector. They have to say, yeah, we're going to build this for you at $12 million a year is your availability payment today, and it's going to grow by, let's say, 3% a year for 40 years, and we're going to still manage and operate these facilities for you. 40 years from now, we're going to hand them back to you and meet these certain performance standards for facilities, condition index. And so everybody's risking, everybody's in the boat together in a P3. And I love that risk sharing model because it makes the private sector, they don't just build something for you and then hand you the keys and say, I hope nothing breaks. But they say, I'm going to be there with you over the long term to operate and maintain this. And I'm on the hook to eat those costs if I didn't build this thing right. And number two, you'd be surprised if the private sector knows it has to build within you think about this as a car payment. If they know they have to deliver that car plus that warranty and they have to fix it if it breaks and they have to stay within that payment, the budget on the way in and the way they build it on the way in is a lot better. So I want you to think about it, that not paying for it, government always saying, I'm just going to pay for it and you give me the keys. Instead saying, hey, why don't we pay for it together, build and operate and maintain it together over the long term, and share in the risk and the cost of fixing it together. You'd be surprised at how the project suddenly becomes a lot more affordable, and it's built with a lot higher quality materials. So those are the kind of arguments that we had to make with that project. Okay, how about Marie, following up on the arts and culture question, are there any accelerator programs for arts and culture initiatives that are focused on wider community development? So I would say, a good example is the Long Beach Accelerator, something we did where we have a Sunstone funded. We actually invested in over 42 different early stage technology startups that went through the Long Beach Accelerator program, nonprofit accelerator. And they have a big component of what you call the creative economy. We call it consumer tech. All these technology in consumer and retail have a really strong component of arts and design and culture, right? That's how you do retail and consumers. You have a really good design, really good user experience. And so we have a really cool fund who's a partner in Long Beach called Imprint Venture Labs. They spun out of a very, very successful creative agency called Intertrend, and a woman named Julia Wong and Tanya, who built this venture fund. And so we partner there, and they have actually in the basement of their headquarters a venture laboratory for their consumer and retail companies, and their focus is creative economy and design and user experience. So yes, that's just one that I'm most intimately involved with, but there's a lot of creative economy focused kinds of programs. And in California, this is what we do: entertainment, design, whether it's Otis or Pasadena Arts College, or you name it. There's a ton of great design schools that are also hubs, because when you think about a lot of the tech companies that are internet based, entertainment based in Southern California, heavy, heavy, heavy dose of design, arts, and culture. So a ton of good stuff there. Annie, how can a region sector coordinator for each job's first region get in contact with those who can help us co-design accelerator tech innovation programs for employers? Oh, you guys have advanced manufacturing. Awesome. Yeah. So I think the first place that I would, we're always happy to tell you how Sunstone was the private capital provider. I'm still on the board of directors there at the Long Beach Accelerator. I'm happy to put you in touch with Vivian Shimayama, who's the chair of that program. They just got $1 million EDA grant. We started it about 4 years ago when I was still the economic development director. That $1 million, the EDA. So the Economic Development Administration, whereas SBA focuses on business development, EDA focuses on job creation around industry clusters. So EDA believed in the Long Beach Accelerator so much that they approved a grant for $1 million, which they're deploying now. They just awarded it, I think, in July or something from the city, June or July. But that is really the place to start, is to talk to groups like the Long Beach Accelerator or the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship that we started at Cal State Long Beach. So the city was a big partner with Jane Connolly. So no surprises, our mayor at the time, Robert Garcia, he was the ASB president at Cal State Long Beach, public university. We're very proud of it. My dad went there as well. But we started Sunstone, the Long Beach Accelerator. We were the first capital partner in that. We're happy to talk about that partnership with the city and the university. And then the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We now fund what's called the CSU Startup Launch, which is now across all 23 campuses in California. We did $1 million commitment through our community fund to fund 5 years at $200,000 a year of prize money for the 5 different tracks of student and faculty entrepreneurs that are coming out of startups coming out of the CSUs. And that's what I would recommend, Annie, is that you start with, of course, you've got your local governments, but go to the universities as the anchors. Community colleges are excellent for this. CSUs and UCs. We partner with UCI, University of California, Irvine here, and sponsor the Born in California Challenge, as well as the Stella Jean competition here for new startups. But we believe that all of these California Jobs First regions are first, the talent is king. So your workforce anchors are your first stop for anything. And you begin by forming those partnerships. You find out who the experts are in the technology, research and development, in the industry clusters, because those CSUs and community colleges, they are anchored in your specific regional industry clusters. And then with those partners, you can build out the workforce strategy, which is talent development, which attracts businesses. Businesses, no surprises. Why are all those AI companies flocking still to Silicon Valley? Because that's where the talent production for AI is. And that's why, even though it's so expensive and it's so horrible and the regulations are so bad, yet all the most advanced space companies are coming to California and coming to Long Beach. Why? Because we have 100 years and like 12 different universities producing level 4 aerospace engineering talent. And that's free to the private sector. So start, Annie, with your workforce engines, your workforce anchors. That's going to attract, companies and investors just like it did in Silicon Valley or in Southern California. And call us, Sunstone Cities. This is what we do. We'd love to connect you with, help you with the strategy or make introductions. Anonymous, will private partners remain interested in working with a city that already has multiple P3s? I would say that is actually an incentive. So let me put it this way. The private sector is risk averse. Most people think of it as being extremely innovative and creative. You cannot lose people's money in the private sector or you're out of business. So the private sector is looking for governments who know what they're doing, have a vision, have a strong understanding of how the economy works, has free workforce engines like CSUs, city colleges, and UCs who are going to produce their workers, and that are already partnering with the private sector because they know how to do it. So, anonymous attendee, give us a call. We absolutely think that private capital will go to places where there's already precedence. And I will say, if you go, there's a great podcast called Acquired. Go listen to these two guys talk about Lockheed Martin and kind of the founding of Silicon Valley. And the dean, who had been at MIT during World War II and who was an expert in radio technology, he came back to Princeton, or he came back to Stanford after World War II, and he started that education private partnership with government contracts, which came through Lockheed, right? All those DoD contracts. And that's how that cluster started. And then a lot of private capital realized that these governments, these education institutions know how to partner and know how to align incentives and basically how to help each other become profitable. So yeah, the more the better, I think, in my opinion, because it shows that people know what they're doing, and California does it better than any state in the country. Yeah, the 40-year real estate project in Long Beach on the Civic Center, that is not a requirement. That is the outgrowth of a very important underwriting criteria when you're looking at private financing. You've been there when you were looking at your home loan, or your car loan. Do you want a 3-year, a 5-year, a 7-year? Do you want a 10-year, 15, or 30-year? Do you want to fix that interest rate or do you want it variable? So every P3 is going to go through a different underwriting process depending on where the repayment source comes from. So in Long Beach, the repayment was going to come. The city said, look, we've only got $12 million a year for the first couple of years. And then as we start to build some of these other properties and get new property tax and sales tax and TOT, we'll have more revenue to contribute to our repayment plan. But that availability payment is going to determine how much money you have. It's going to determine how big the project you can build is and how long it's going to take for you to repay. So it could be 10 years, it could be 5 years, it could be 40 years, depending on the availability or repayment source. Okay, I can see where a P3 works well in a small city and a city understands the sector that you're working in. Or if you have a large city and it aligns with their economic development plan. But do you have any tips for making the case for a smaller job creation projects and accessing staff who could help with creating P3 in larger cities? Absolutely. So the funny thing is that, and I love the idea of starting with jobs. The funny thing is that when we at Sunstone Cities step in with a city like we're doing with the city of Lakewood, we actually start with employment trends analysis. We start with jobs, because if we can see over the last 3 to 5 years what's been going on with your jobs, we know obviously what the business activity is too. What kind of jobs, what kind of jobs are being created, or what type of job growth is there in this region. So it doesn't matter if it's small, but we want to see a trend. And we want to see that there's also a couple of other things in place. So as an example, we want to know what the underlying, kind of bait is. Why are businesses coming here? Are they feeding off of, the bait? Are they feeding off of government contracts? A lot of the answers are because there's a strong government or education sector there. Are they feeding off of the workforce engines, the colleges, universities, community colleges, and technical schools? Or are they feeding off of a supply chain from some big, huge employer like a Boeing, right? Boeing has like an $8 billion supply chain in Southern California. So there's all these smaller companies that feed off of the bigger fish, right? It's kind of like you see those pictures of like the whale and all those little fish are kind of eating off of the barnacles on the whale, or the crabs are living there. So we always want to start with jobs, and we always want to start with what's the attractant. And when we know what you are, we can grow what you are. And so that's kind of a way we would begin with you. And we could probably do an analysis for you in 30 days. And it's not a huge lift because there's so much good publicly available data now that we can pull. Thank you, Anonymous. Good examples. Are there specific accelerators that focus on climate technologies? Yes. So this is one, there's a lot of them, but I'm going to give a plug for Matt Peterson and the LA Clean Tech Incubator, because they're one of the forefront, and they are a perfect example of a P3. So LA Clean Tech Incubator has been around for a little while. I want to say they're in their second decade now. So they're really at the forefront. And it was the city government that said, you know what, we need to work on more energy efficient solutions for water, power, transportation, right? We need to stabilize our grid. So one of the biggest water and power utilities in America is DWP. No surprises there. They needed solutions to be more efficient and to be more clean and meet these goals, both environmental, economic, and social. So LA Clean Tech Incubator is a good example of the kind of nonprofit accelerator or incubator program that will bring in early stage technologies. And here's what I love about them. They will then find ways, like some of our own startups. They've taken companies like Electric, that's in our portfolio, and helped find them pilot projects with big corporations or with government, right? Government as customer and government as investor is actually one of the biggest and best ways, or things that investors look for startups to scale. So Lacey is a really good example of a clean tech incubator and accelerator program in LA, anchored by the city of Los Angeles, anchored by their big utility departments. Think how brilliant that is. That if you already have, they live on government land, they got financial participation to build their facilities, but then what they do is they attract the best and brightest entrepreneurs from around the world in clean tech. So it's brilliant, and then they can help them with pilot projects with large government enterprises like DWP. So I love that. I'm checking the time. We have about 15 minutes left, but can P3 help with workforce development to fund trainings and certification programs? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where I love what the Employment Development Department does in California with our employee, training program money. So let me give you an example of this. When we were trying to help these rocket launch companies get settled in Long Beach, one of the things that they struggle with is their employees are extremely expensive. So number one, what they need great universities and colleges and city colleges like Long Beach Community College that train employees and train workers. And that can be an evergreen source of workforce talent. That's a huge cost. But the problem is when you're doing additive printing and satellite launch, you also are doing such cutting edge stuff that in some circumstances, you need the community college district or the CSU to actually change their curriculum, produce, use new equipment for their training. I mean, think about that. We're upscaling all our manufacturing, and a lot of this additive printing needs a whole different curriculum at the community college or at the CSU. So P3 is perfect for this because you have your industry partners, you have your Boeings, you have your rocket labs, you have your relativity space. They need to partner with the publicly operated and funded community college districts. Well, where does that money come from? CSUs don't have, they're going through cuts. Community college districts, you're going through cuts. So oftentimes we will, city, private industry, and the community college or CSUs, we will go to the state together and say, we want some of this ETP money, or we want to do a grant from the Employment Development Department, and we want that money to go into the community college district who's committed for the next 3 to 5 years to develop this curriculum and train 20 students per semester in this new additive manufacturing skill. Does that make sense? It doesn't even have to be rocket launch. I believe it's ULI is the automotive training program, certification program that they're in Douglas Park. They're right there in Space Beach. They work closely with our technical and trade schools, and they get that money helps from the state. And you can talk to GO-Biz. You can talk to, they know this stuff. They can help you navigate the state money, help you find the P3 partners from industry, government, and the education sectors. California does this better than anywhere. It's just that Californians don't know about it. I think, Christina says, no question, proud to share that we're a part of a training partnership with Lacey and several LA government, city and county entities, and we're working on upskilling mechanics to service electric vehicles. Lacey is amazing. Okay, there you go. Talk to Christina Kubrin. She's on the call. Contact Lacey. Tell them Sunstone sent you. This is what they do, and that's what I think we're trying to do here with GO-Biz is just highlight the stuff that's already available to you and supercharge our growth. Because I'll tell you this, as we move forward in this economy, the federal government wants to play less of a role in the economy, less of a role in California, which is not a problem. We have, what did I say, 140 trillion in the global bond market. CalPERS has a $100 billion investment mandate for climate-related investment. And they're a California pension fund. There's over $1 trillion just in the 15 biggest pension funds in California alone. And that includes, Lacers and Lacera and like the city and county pension funds. Over $1 trillion under management right now in our state. So we don't even need grants. We've got capital. We've got investors wanting to invest in California, and we certainly don't need the federal government to make our economy hum because they're up and down. The administrations change, but California does not. We continue to lead. So talk with the GO-Biz staff. Really dig into the infrastructure bank and what they're doing, and in the iHubs, and then let us know how we can support you. Do we have any other questions? We answered 24 of them, so.
Yeah, a lot of great questions, and really appreciate the informative and detailed responses, John.
Of course, of course. So let me know if there's anything else that you would like for us to address or follow up on. And please come visit us in Irvine at Airport Towers. We have an office in Long Beach at the World Trade Center. Anybody wants to do any of this kind of stuff, this is from a Californian's perspective. I was born here. My dad was the first Keisler to go to college at Cal State Long Beach. So we're going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Let us know how we can support you. And let's make California a $5 trillion GDP within the next couple of years.
I really appreciate that, John. Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. Want to extend a major thank you to you, John, for delivering such an informative and engaging presentation. Really appreciate all the great work Sunstone Cities is doing for the state of California. I also want to thank all of you for joining us today. As a reminder, the recording and slide deck will be sent to registrants over the next couple days. Looking ahead, our next session in this webinar series will take place on Thursday, September 11th at 11 a.m. same time. And that session will focus on tax increment financing tools. And we're excited to have Larry Cosmont and Cosmont Companies presenting on that webinar session. Going forward, these webinars will be held on the second Thursday of each month at the same time. And we'll send out email notifications with the registration link in advance of each webinar. If you like to make sure that you're on the distribution list for our future announcements, you can subscribe to our website, and we dropped the link in the chat. And I also included my contact information. So if you have any follow-up questions for John or myself, you can reach out and we'll go ahead and get those answered for you. So once again, want to thank you all for spending part of your day with us. Thank you again, John, for a great presentation. And we look forward to seeing you all at future sessions. And we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week.